Welcome back to another installment of the Celtics Talk Weekly podcast. Guys, we got a great episode ahead of us. We are going to be looking at the 2025 Boston Celtics recap in Vegas. We got big man trouble brewing in Boston. More moves potentially coming with Brad Stevens and the Boston Celtics. And then we're going to wrap it up with my three winners and losers of the offseason so far. So guys, stay tuned. This is going to be a great episode. Hope you guys are ready. Buckle up and let's get going. Here we go. Where were you when the Boston Celtics went 4-1 in the 2025 Las Vegas NBA 2K26 Summer League? Because I know where I was. I was on my couch wishing the Boston Celtics were playing in June, and I didn't have to watch this. I mean, I'm not a Summer League guy. I never really have been. I don't find enjoyment in watching the Summer League unless I'm watching a big name player on my team. I don't know what it is. I have tried my absolute hardest to enjoy the Summer League, but I just haven't been able to get there. However, guys, I got a quick little 2025 Boston Celtics Summer League Las Vegas recap with you. Kind of my thoughts, takeaways on a real quick looking back now that it is concluded here for the Celtics side of things. They played 5 games. They were winners of 4, losers of 1. Honestly, I thought they had one of the most polished Summer League team out there. I thought Brad and the Celtics put together a lineup that had potential to have real roster implications. Boston is very much so, I believe, an incomplete team right now, which we're going to talk a little bit more later in this podcast alongside Celtics Talk Weekly Live host Seamus Zarlingo. He's going to be helping us break down what Brad Stevens and the Boston Celtics perspective moving forward could look like. But as for the back end of that rotation, I believe it is very much so open right now. Our rostered big men are Xavier Tillman, Neemias Queta, and Luka Garza. I believe there are moves going to be made to maybe elevate someone else ahead of those guys. Our forward rotation is really Jaylen Brown, Jordan Walsh, Josh Minott, and Sam Hauser. Really, those 2 units are really weak right now. So I believe this Summer League had some implications. The standouts, in my opinion, the standout really was Charles Bassey. He was with the Boston Celtics for the first 3 Summer League games. He did not play in games 4 and 5 against the Lakers and the Hawks. And he stood out in the first 2 games without a question. I mean, Bassey really showed that he probably didn't belong in the Summer League. I found out during the game against Memphis, as soon as he checked in, that Bassey was rostered with the Celtics. It was not announced until I want to say 20 minutes before the game. But Bassey's an interesting one because Bassey has kind of been a guy now that has been in the league for 4 years. He's 25 years old or turning 25 years old soon. And he's kind of been this efficient 15-minute per game, 5.6 rebounds guy, no matter where he's been, on a very efficient shooting and some solid defensive efficiency. And for some reason, a team hasn't been like, okay, here's 25 minutes, here's 30 minutes a night. What does it look like? And I think that's interesting. And I think Boston may have found something with him. Now, I'm not saying this is a guy that can come in and be the starting big man for a, real playoff NBA Finals contender. But in a gap year in which could look different for Boston, I believe Bassey could come in and make real roster implications. I thought he was polished. I thought he clearly looked ahead of the field in the Summer League, which in my opinion is a telltale sign whether or not a player is going to make an NBA roster or not. It is really an eye test. Right? If you're an NBA rotation player, the Summer League you should be able to do with your eyes closed. It should be incredibly slowed down. It should be incredibly easy to get to your spots and to get what you want and to get rebounds and to get out in transition. You should be very much so in control. Bassey showed me that. In my opinion, I believe he is a real option for the Boston Celtics. We're going to have to see what Brad Stevens does. If there's more moves coming, again, another segment in this podcast. We're going to talk about that later. But Bassey was a standout. And the loser of this entire, and I know we got winners and losers of the offseason, coming up as well on this podcast. But how about the loser of the Summer League? Jordan Walsh, I'm sorry. That was bad. That was really, really abysmal and bad. I was very let down with what Jordan Walsh showed me. I was honestly kind of let down with what Shireman showed me, but Shireman's a shooter, and he showed me more than Walsh has in his 20-game stint where when he was covering for Sam Hauser. And it's like I've seen something out of Shireman. I haven't seen it out of out of Walsh. And I was looking to the Summer League as an opportunity for Walsh to be like, okay, again, set yourself from the field, right? Show me you're an NBA player. You've seen a lot of NBA basketball. You've been on a championship team in championship caliber intensity practices. This Summer League should be a cakewalk for you. It wasn't. It was bad. I mean, he looked out of control. He was fouling left and right. He was getting into altercations. I mean, it was just bad. I mean, he had a successful offensive game against the Los Angeles Lakers. But outside of that, he just didn't look like the polished scorer we need to see out of Walsh. I think Walsh has real NBA defensive ability with upsides there. His offensive game hasn't taken that step yet, and we're entering year 3. So it's like, how much time do we give Jordan Walsh? How much time, are we going to push it with him? Because, yes, on one hand, he's been on this roster for the Celtics now for 2 full seasons. He's entering his third year. But on the other hand, he's only 21. And, for me, in the direction with Jordan Walsh, it is like, is this another Aaron Nesmith in the making, right? Where it's going to work out, and it could work out, and he has the upside to work out, but it won't be in Boston. So we'll see that. And then the one thing kind of keeping me, positive about the Jordan Walsh situation is that this is kind of the first season we're going to get with Jordan Walsh where he truly has control in real potential within a lineup, right? He could play 25 minutes a game nightly. We haven't seen that with Walsh before. It's been 10 minutes there, or do not play the next game, 5 minutes here and there, and playing every other week and going back up and down from Boston, Maine, his rookie year. So it really hasn't had any, stability in Jordan Walsh's NBA career yet. I believe more stability could come in 25, 26, but I do believe Jordan Walsh's opportunity in Boston is on the hot seat right now. And to me, that was the biggest standout alongside Bassey in Summer League. Some other thoughts on Summer League. Again, I thought you saw guys that are going to be on the back half of your rotation, like Miles Norris and Shireman. They did exactly kind of what I expected them to do. Shireman's a player I got a lot of faith in this season in terms of offensive productivity off the bench. I believe he can kind of be that hybrid of a wing guard guy alongside Pritchard that can produce at a higher level, or at least a rotation level that we might need for him. Give us a solid 7 points off the bench, be a spark plug. I got a lot of faith in Shireman. I do have defensive concerns with Shireman, especially with the addition of Simons. You got Simons and Pritchard and Shireman, and not a whole lot of defense. And you bring in Garza, who's also kind of this defensive lug out there at times. And that could get a little concerning for Boston. But in terms of Summer League, again, Boston did exactly kind of what I expected them to do. They were probably one of the most polished Summer League teams. They showed that with a 4-1 record. And they did their thing. They didn't really have any real rookie standouts other than Hugo Gonzalez, who, again, Hugo, first-round draft pick for Boston. She kind of showed me exactly what I expected, right? Here is Hugo Gonzalez, who this athletic, defensively, tool guy that they have that needs work offensively. And to me, that sounds like Jordan Walsh. Now, what I'm hoping Boston and Brad and Joe do with Hugo this season is throw him to the Sharks, right? Make him tread water, make him swim. Maybe he gets pulled down underwater a couple times this year, but you need Hugo Gonzalez to be getting NBA minutes this season. I don't want to see him jumping up and back and forth, from Maine and Boston and Maine and Boston. I don't want to see that. He's a first-round pick. You drafted him in the first round. It is an extremely wide open rotation. Let him go through his ups and downs that comes with what being an NBA rookie looks like. I want to see that from him this season. Again, more of the same from Hugo in the Summer League, because to me, again, I might be a broken record here with Hugo Gonzalez, but I love what he brings defensively. In what he showed me offensively were stints in those first 2 games of offensive capability, right? NBA shot making, but it's the summer league, and it wasn't at a level that was clearly ahead of the pack. And I do want to see that. So it will be interesting to see what Hugo's role looks like moving forward. However, in terms of the summer league, I thought it was a successful one for the Boston Celtics. Again, Bassey, Hugo, those guys kind of stood out to me. Meanwhile, Miles, Norris, Shireman, and Walsh, I thought they were a little bit disappointing. But again, a real opportunity for some of these guys to get camp deals, and it should be very interesting to see how that plays out for the Boston Celtics side of things. I'm excited to keep looking into it as the offseason progresses, guys. But up next, I'm sitting down with Celtics Talk Weekly Live host Seamus Zarlingo. He has been on the podcast before. You've heard him on the post-game shows. I mean, you know the man. He'll be joining us, guys, up next, talking a little bit of big man trouble in Beantown and some potential moves coming for the future of the Boston Celtics. Simons and Niang, are they staying? Are they moving? I don't know. We're going to find out up next as our Seamus Zarlingo joins the show. All right, here we are, joined in with host of the Celtics Talk Weekly Live, Seamus Zarlingo. Seamus, thanks for joining me in. I'm excited what we got ahead. We're talking some big man trouble in Boston and some potential more moves coming, starting off with the big man. We've talked about this before. We have. It feels like this is a conversation. Maybe if it was an off screen, we have talked about how putrid, and maybe I know where you're at, but maybe for the people watching or listening with this is their first time hearing your overall general takeaway from what the big man situation is like in Boston. But it's pretty, you're treading water right now with the C's.
If you look at the entire rotation right now, this rotation reminds me, the big man rotation that is, it reminds me of the big man rotation, the Celtics big man rotation from 2019-20. Right now, the Celtics have Luka Garza, Neemias Queta, Xavier Tillman, and Amari Williams, and maybe Charles Bassey. Maybe Charles
Right.
Bassey. We don't know about Charles Bassey yet. We're going to put the maybe tag on him. If you look at those five bigs, it's very reminiscent of what the Celtics had in 2019-20, where they had Daniel Tice, who at the time was unproven going into that season, played 2 seasons before that, but was very much a reserve big and not a in the rotation big. But he had Daniel Tice. You had Robert Williams, who again was unproven. That was his second year in the NBA. And then Enes Kanter. That's a little bit. That's where I see this Celtics big man rotation maybe missing a peg, where you need a player. When the Celtics brought in Enes Kanter in 2019-20, that was to solidify the big man rotation, which was looking pretty thin at the time. And I understand Daniel Tyson, Robert Williams, people are going to look at those guys and go, well, they were solid options. But going into that 2019-20 season, those players were unproven. Daniel Tice only had 2 years under his belt, and Robert Williams was a rookie. And then outside of that, you had Enes Kanter, right? The Celtics signed during the summer. That's what the Celtics are missing right now. They need another veteran big. Enes Kanter came in and solidified that rotation. After Enes Kanter, it was Vincent Poirier, who did absolutely
A
nothing with
name.
the
That's a
Celtics.
name.
Taco Fall, who did absolutely, I don't want to say did nothing with the Celtics, but nothing real productive
But
in
yeah,
terms
no,
of
yeah.
consistency over time. Especially going into that season, it was his rookie year, and he was a two-way guy. I mean, that's basically the Amari Williams role here.
Mhm.
But Daniel Tice and Robert Williams, Daniel Tice, Robert Williams, Enes Kanter, Vincent Poirier, and Taco Fall. Going into the 2019-20 season, that big man rotation was looked at as utterly atrocious. However, we know a couple of these guys stepped up, such as Daniel Tice, such as Robert Williams, who had developed into a near all-star level big, a near defensive player of the year type of big. And we know Enes Kanter was somewhat solid during his time with the Boston Celtics. He wasn't the best big in the world, but the Celtics could plug and play him here and there. That big man rotation was not looked at in the most fond manner yet. It turned out to be one that was solid. That's what ultimately could happen with this Celtics big man rotation, although I wouldn't necessarily bet on that to be the entire case. There are definitive holes within this year's Celtics big man rotation that didn't quite exist in this rotation, or at least the 2019-20 rotation, where this year Luka Garza, Keita, if you want to throw in Charles Bassey in there, they're all unproven bigs. I mean, they're proven to a certain degree of they played minimal minutes in the NBA. They played some minutes in the NBA, but they're not all the way proven as rotation pieces. They're usually the 10th, 11th man on a roster, which course, when we talk about some players who just left, Luke Cornett, he was that player, and that's what you hope if you're the Celtics, these guys turn into in the long run. Queta, Garza, and even Charles Bassey potentially if he's on the roster next year. But then you go down further in the big man rotation. Tillman didn't play at all last year. We're talking about him as a salary. We're talking about him as a salary dump guy. And then you have Amari Williams, who's on a two-way. And anytime you have a big on a two-way and a rookie, you don't really expect too much out of him. But the Celtics big man rotation, there are a couple of guys who have played minutes in the NBA but aren't proven. And then you have guys who, like Xavier Tillman, played minutes in the finals but ultimately fell off the cliff last year. And then Amari Williams, who you could put into the unproven category as well, but at the end of the day, no NBA experience from Amari Williams. This big man rotation potentially for the Celtics going into the season could be one of the worst units of any unit in the entire NBA. You think about guard units, wing units, big units. This unit could be the worst out of any unit. That being said, there is a roadmap for the Celtics to be a little bit better than expected at that position if guys like Luka Garza, if guys like Neemias Queta, and even if Charles Bassey's on the roster, if they can up their game a little bit. And I kind of look at it as a quarterback situation too in the NFL where you have three different guys who you think, we don't really have our main guy here, but we're giving out tryouts essentially. The Celtics, if you look at their big man core, it's like a tryout season because you'd think with the five big men there, if you want to include Charles Bassey, the five big men, can one of them be good? Can one of them be the Luke Cornett? Can one of them be a serviceable big going into the future? And that's what the Celtics are hoping for. And not only that, can two of them or multiple of them be a serviceable big man, a rotational big man going into the future? That's the roadmap. As I lose my voice here, folks.
Well, who's your guy then, right? Because I'm with you. The rotation is a bunch of question marks. You got Garza, you're bringing in Bassey, who's not even rostered, but you expect to get a training camp deal. We've talked about Bassey on the post-game shows in the summer league. I just finished the segment talking about Bassey. You got Neemias, who we saw last year, right? And he showed stints of like being a really serviceable backup big, but there was clear weaknesses in his game that were preventing him from being that. And what you had with Luke Cornett was a little too good for him to kind of jump the rotation over him. So who's and then obviously Amari Williams, who's a question mark, who's probably going to be spending most of his time down up in Maine. But like, who's your guy? If you were to put your stock in at least one of those four, I like what you said, quarterbacks. Like, is it Nemi? Is it Garza? I mean, are we putting our money on Bassey making this rotation? Like, or is it someone else? Because we're going to talk about more moves, coming up in the pod. So it's like, where are you at? Are you putting your stock in any of these guys, or are you going elsewhere with this?
Well, we'd have to start with Queta because Queta is a player who's been in the Celtics organization for quite some time now. This will be his third season within the Celtics rotation next year in 25-26. You'd have to look at him first just because of the experience within the Celtics organization. But then after him, Garza is a player the Celtics have reportedly looked at over time. He's still 26 years old, still somewhat of a young player going into his prime. And the talk around Garza is in the short periods of time he's actually played, he's been a stats darling, which means he's been an efficient player. And part of also the conversation has been he's been behind guys like Julius Randle, Naz Reid, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, all these great bigs with the Minnesota Timberwolves over the last couple of seasons that he hasn't necessarily seen his opportunity to thrive and shine within an NBA rotation. And the Celtics, Brad Stevens, they've looked at Luka Garza, who was basically an MVP in college at Iowa. He won the Wooden Award, which is essentially the MVP award in college. An MVP at Iowa, and somebody who's also been in the NBA for now 4 years with two different franchises, the Pistons and the Timberwolves, learning behind great all-star, all-NBA caliber bigs and a good coaching staff too in Minnesota. Now that Luka Garza is coming in, and you look at all the circumstances within his history and his timeline, and Brad Stevens in the Celtics front office viewing Luka Garza over time, he definitely owns a chance to make an impact within the Celtics big man rotation and be a guy like Daniel Theis. That's why I compare this rotation to the 2019-20 rotation. Luka Garza or even Queta could be a Daniel Tice in the future, or even a Luke Cornett. I mean, Daniel Tice and Luke Cornett went from $2 million minimum guys to $10 million. Oh, we can't keep them around because they make a little bit too much money for their services. Daniel Tice, the Celtics moved on from him via trade with the Chicago Bulls, and then of course we know the Luke Cornett history as of late. Luke Cornett signs with the San Antonio Spurs, and both of those deals were around $10 million. Luka Garza right now and Keita, they're under $2 million deals, and it's possible in the future if they play themselves up to a respectable level within the Celtics rotation and even a starting level within the Celtics rotation, they could be $10 million guys in the future as well. And I want to point out too with Garza, he was actually signed on the first day of free agency, which means the Celtics actually wanted him. There was no dilly-dallying. There was no, oh, let's search the market, right? The Celtics wanted Luka Garza, and Luka Garza obviously saw a chance to make an impact in Boston with the big man deficit existing within the Celtics rotation right now, or rather in the organization. And the two came together, the Celtics front office and Luka Garza. Now Luka Garza is on the Celtics roster, and I believe he definitely owns a chance to be that Daniel Tice level player. We saw Tice and even Cornette, Tice and Cornette form into during their time within the Celtics organization. I see the same path for Luka Garza potentially, especially given his 26-year-old age. Keita and Garza, those are the two leading candidates in my mind. If Bassey's actually on the roster, this is where I want to tread water with Charles Bassey a little bit. He's technically a free agent right now. So the Celtics, if they want to bring him in, they actually have to ink him to a deal. And we all know the Celtics 15 roster spots already filled, already over the second apron again after they dipped under that second apron from the Porzingis and Holiday moves. So the Charles Bassey inclusion in the Celtics rotation is not yet guaranteed, but if he's there, he's another player you'd hope to be able to coach up. He's a little less so in my mind. I mean, if you think about Charles Bassey, he was the only player out of those three that played in the summer league, right? So you're thinking, well, Garza and Keita was in the summer league last year. The Celtics decided not to send him to summer league this year, and then Garza, he wasn't involved in summer league. This would be his his fifth NBA season, if I'm not mistaken. He's going into now. So those two guys, they weren't even a part of summer league. Meanwhile, Charles Bassey was. So that it kind of shows a little bit more of that potential rawness within Charles Bassey compared to Garza and Keita, who have seen. I mean, they've all seen NBA minutes, but the quality of such, might go to Garza and Keita and the impact in which they've been able to make. As for the other two bigs, I'm just not counting on Tillman to do anything within the rotation, given the fact, number one, Brad termed him as more of a four at his press conference, which I find to be, I mean, I guess when you're playing him next to Porzingis and Al Horford the last 2 years, yes, he's more of a four, but Tillman, he's not a stretch big whatsoever. I mean, if he's a four, he's kind of a traditional power forward that's been completely played out of the league. And
He's like a 2000s four. He's like a Brandon Bass four.
Exactly. And we've had this conversation so many times with Tillman last season, whether it was with Xavier or we had this conversation as well. Tillman, Joe Mazzulla uses Tillman in such a horrific manner that I am I supposed to be confident next season Joe Mazzulla is randomly going to flip the script and say, oh, let me use Tillman in this way instead of that way, which when I say this way instead of that way, using him more inside the interior rather than on the perimeter. Am I supposed to be more confident in Joe Mazzulla potentially doing that next season? Because we haven't seen it at all. In the 2 seasons, Xavier Tillman, or rather the season and a half, Xavier Tillman's been with the Celtics. Xavier Tillman's been used as a perimeter big, somebody who's standing in the corner, somebody who's picking and popping on the perimeter. And yet we dove into his 3-point percentage for his career. It hovers around 20-25% if you go all the way back to his Michigan State days. So at no point in the last, essentially this decade, right? If you just look at this decade, since 2020, Xavier Tillman has not proven to be a 3-point shooter at Michigan State, with the Memphis Grizzlies, or with the Boston Celtics. Yet Joe Mazzulla continuously uses him as a stretch big when he's just not. If Mazzulla can utilize Tillman in a different way, and of course Tillman, he needs to get those bricks. He needs to chip those bricks off his feet. All right,
Yeah.
he's just very slow-footed. For some reason, came into it, last season. All right, 38-year-old Al Horford should not look more athletic, quicker, faster, right, than 26-year-old Xavier Tillman. It just makes no sense. All
It
right,
didn't
Al
always
Horford
look like
is
that either. It did not. I remember watching his Memphis tape, and if we got any Memphis Grizzlies fans listening or watching it, like let us know if we're wrong, but did not feel like it's always been like that for Tillman.
no, no. Last season was particularly atrocious, and I think last season was worse than the season prior. I mean, the season prior he was actually used in the playoff run, and he has that classic moment in Game 3 of the NBA Finals. Game 3 was pretty close there at the end. Like the history of the finals in the future, or right now rather, in the present, a year after the finals, is we dominated the Dallas Mavericks, which is predominantly true. The Celtics dominated the Mavericks, that is. But game 3, it was very close to being a 2-1 series. And Xavier Tillman came into that game and made a legitimate impact. Hit a couple threes, which then, of course, boosted the narrative that he was a stretch big, which he just simply isn't. And he has that classic moment, and he had that classic moment. And even think back to the Sacramento game in 2024, where he wins that game at the end. So Xavier Tillman, he's produced in the Celtics rotation before, but I believe if he's going to produce again, number one, he has to get in better shape. I mean, that's just a fact. He has to get in better shape because 24-25 was just, I mean, he wasn't in shape. And then secondarily, Joe Mazzulla has to consider utilizing Xavier Tillman as a more interior post-scoring player, right? A
Right.
player who's more in the dunker spot, scoring on cuts, scoring on post-ups, scoring in those manners, and not shooting threes constantly. I mean, every time Xavier Tillman came into a game last year in 24-25, he was jacking up threes. And what was perplexing too, he played 7 minutes per game last year, and most of that was garbage time, but he wouldn't
Right.
even get in during garbage time last year.
No.
So that definitely concerns me. But then you go down to Amari Williams, right? So first of all, to round up on Xavier Tillman, could there be a path where he's actually utilized in the Celtics rotation? Given the big man core right now, I think you'd have to consider utilizing Xavier Tillman to some degree if he's actually on the roster come the season. He could be a guy the Celtics look to cut, but I've talked about this with Franco. Franco believes we were all on the train of Xavier Tillman could be somebody shipped out for a salary for salary dump purposes at the trade
Right.
deadline last year, but now he's playing too crucial of a position to just salary dump, basically, where the Celtics big man core is at. You could see a role for Xavier Tillman next year in some regard, but I wouldn't expect him to be the starter. I wouldn't expect him to be the main big. He would have to be the third or fourth big at that. And there is a roadmap, but is the efficiency going to be there? Likely not. And if Xavier Tillman's playing a big role in the big man rotation, the Celtics big man rotation is probably in trouble. That being said, going down to Amari Williams, I absolutely love Amari Williams' game. I mean, I was big on him during the draft, before the draft, even after the draft. During the summer league, I thought he was one of the more impressive players. I mean, he was one of the few players on the Celtics summer league squad that actually furthered his case for minutes next year, whether that's up in Maine or even with the Boston Celtics. But potentially being a two-way player, Amari Williams, I would expect to be mostly with the Maine Celtics next year. And there are some definite raw areas of his game. I mean, some of his timing, some of his aggressiveness. He's very athletic. He can definitely pass the ball, and there are and I really look at his physique, and he's a big man. He's 7 foot tall, but he almost looks like a Ford. So there's definitely some versatility there in Amari Williams' game. But there are definitely some raw spots, such as his timing, both on the defensive and offensive end of the floor. Just the timing in the roles, the aggressiveness in the roles, some of the strength around the bucket, and then on the defensive end of the floor, we all know defensively it's all about positioning and the technique of how you're defending and how you're playing team defense as well, how you're communicating and playing in relevancy with everybody else. Some of those areas within Amari Williams' game needs a little bit of polishing, but that will likely come up in Maine the way we saw it with Baylor Shireman and other two-way players of the past. Baylor Shireman not a two-way player, nor Jordan Walsh, but those guys in Maine and other two-way players of the past as well. I would say Amari Williams is on the track to not make so much of an impact in the Celtics big man rotation, but I'll give out this scenario because the initial thought is Amari Williams as a two-way guy is probably not coming in and playing a huge role. But if the Celtics big man rotation is as atrocious as some people project it to be, there's maybe a slot for Amari Williams to come in and play major minutes and grab a standard spot. Like other guys we've seen in the past with other franchises where you have a guy on a two-way spot and he's just so clearly an NBA player, and by the end of the season, he's on a standard spot. That could happen with Amari Williams, considering some of his talents, some of his abilities, and the Celtics big man core right now, which people around the league, let's face it, don't trust whatsoever. I mean, there could be a massive talent deficit that just forms immediately. Garza's not the guy. Keita's not the guy. Tillman's unplayable, right? And who else am I forgetting? Charles Bassey, right? Charles Bassey isn't even here
Right,
with the
he's on our roster.
Celtics. And then all of a sudden, Amari Williams is the only option, and then he's on a standard spot. That could happen, but I would project more likely than not, he's going to be down in Maine. So if you're asking me who's going to be the guy, it's got to be either Garza or Keita.
Right.
Is Bassey going to be here? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. And then Tillman and Amari Williams. Those are the two wild cards where you're thinking, they could be either nothing, or they could be something, or they could really be everything.
The thing with Amari for me, he's got like some of the basketball tools you just can't really teach. Like you watch him play and he just kind of gets the game, and that's what makes him exciting for me. And I don't think Amari's a next year guy. I think Amari's like a project, where you might see him in the rotation the year prior. But I mean, like his passing stood out. I think his defensive versatility is there. Like this is a guy that like has the stuff that's really tough to teach. And you can teach him the stuff that he's lacking, kind of that offensive versatility of us actually scoring the ball. And again, this defensive IQ will come with more NBA run and more basketball. But not too surprised with your position with the big men. I'm pretty much right there with you, which brings me to my next point in terms of, is this really what Boston's going to put out, right? Because you said second apron, and their goal coming in, and Brad made it clear coming into this offseason that the goal was to avoid the second apron, get the hell out of there. Here they are now projected to be back under the second apron, and we are hearing rumors now of moves potentially not in the works, but Boston's still calling. You got Simons coming in, you bring in Niang, right, via trade. That's the Kristaps and Drew kind of add-ons. Now, for you, is there a move coming for Boston, and what does it look like, right? Is it a dump, a salary dump with Niang? Is it a swap with Simons, Niang, and Hauser? Like, what exactly, if there is a move, if you think so, for Boston, what does it look like, and in what direction is Boston going to try to go in?
Well, what's interesting about the Celtics roster right now is the two candidates in which I mean, there are a lot of candidates, let's face it, that people are bringing up for salary dump purposes or just general trade purposes, right? But two of the newly acquired players, right? Anthony Simons and George Niang, I'm so close to saying Georges. Apparently it's George. We got to get used to that this season. Yes, I learned from Griffin. All right, I learned from Griffin. But Griffin's had a back and forth with it before, because he went from Georges to George, back to Georges to George again.
George,
so I'm on the George train.
My apologies to George Niang. First time saying it right.
I don't think I've said. I think this might be the first podcast I've actually said it right. I don't know. George
Niang.
You
got to start somewhere. Newly Boston Celtics.
Exactly. But Niang and Simons, right? Those are two players a lot of people are thinking, could they be rerouted elsewhere? I tend to think those two players are actually going to stick around. Now, they are on expiring deals, right? $27 million for Simons, around $8 million for Niang. They're on expiring deals, which make them candidates to be moved elsewhere, either this offseason or even at the trade deadline for certain. But they're also players who, in the next season, right, or at least next offseason, maybe there's a restructuring with their deals with the Celtics, and maybe they rejoin the Boston Celtics, or maybe they even ink extensions before the season in some regard. Maybe it could even be a Josh Richardson situation with maybe a Niang, right, where Josh Richardson inked a 1-year extension with the Celtics once he was traded to the Celtics. Maybe we would have already seen that with these guys if that was going to happen, but Simons and Niang are definitely two players that people are looking at to be rerouted. But I got to say, they could be two players that are actually on the Celtics roster for multiple seasons just because of the style of players they are. Number one, they're both 3-point shooters. They're both sharpshooters. I mean, Niang and Simons. Simons is one of the more efficient 3-point shooters in the entire NBA. And so is Niang. Niang, not only is he one of the more efficient 3-point shooters in the NBA, given the history of the NBA, now we have to think 3-point shooters in time, say in the 90s, the 80s, they weren't as efficient in terms of the volume as players today. But Niang, on certain spectrums, he's one of the best 3-point shooters in NBA history, given his numbers. Now, again, you have to factor in today's era of basketball with the era of basketball back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Not quite the same. So the pool of players is a little small. If you actually look at some of the best 3-point shooters in NBA history, they're 3-point shooters from today's game. They're 3-point shooters from today's era. But we all know the Missoula ball philosophy on the offensive end of the floor. It's about shooting 3-point shots and shooting them at a high volume. And sometimes we see it shooting it at a 60% rate in terms of the shot distribution from threes to two. I mean, we'll see games where the Celtics are taking 60% of their shots from 3-point range. So we know the Celtics love to shoot threes, and the Celtics just so happen to pick up two of the better 3-point shooters in the NBA, period, for the positions they play, Niang and Simons. And I do look at those NBA skills both of them harbor, because we always talk about, now let's face it, Niang and Simons, they harbor many other skills from just their 3-point shooting. But we talked about it a lot during Summer League, and we've been talking about it a lot during the draft, how players need a definitive skill that they can lean on, that teams actually find value in within their rotation or just within their roster. Niang and Simons, the biggest value both of them own to me when it comes to fitting into the Celtics rotation is their 3-point shooting. Obviously, Simons can score the ball in isolation, and Niang can be a pesky defender as well. They own other skills, but that alone, I'm looking at those two players and going, that I believe could keep them on the Boston Celtics for longer than just a month here. They've been on the Celtics for literally exactly a month as of, well, I guess tomorrow. Of tomorrow.
So then for you, where does the finger go? Is there a move? Is it Hauser? Because Hauser's still rostered $10 million. It's kind of a luxury Boston can't really afford anymore. Because they got to get under the second apron. They got to get out of that thing, right? And they're I believe projected $2 million into it right now.
See, okay, I'm perplexed, but here's my thing. I'm gonna put, so first of all, Simons and Niang, in terms of I'm gonna put them off the trade block. All right, I'm gonna take them off the trade block. I think a lot of people are putting those guys on the trade block, but I'm gonna take those guys off the trade block. As for everybody else, so Sam Hauser, I think people are undervaluing Sam Hauser just a little bit, because at $10 million, he's not sporting an egregious contract, and he's again a player that provides a definitive need to the Boston Celtics, which is again 3-point shooting. We all know Sam Hauser is an absolute sniper, which I got to say, Basketball Reference updating the roster, updating the salary sheet. Congratulations. I mean, it was a kind of a mess the last couple of weeks, but hey, shout out to Basketball Reference there. But Sam Hauser, I don't think he's as movable of a player as people think he is. I think he's thinking about the talent deficit that is starting to exist on the Celtics roster, given the fact Porzingis, Holiday, Cornette, Horford, they'll be walking out the door, right? Think about all those players who are walking out and the players who are coming in. Yes, Simons, Niang, they're solid players, but they don't necessarily make up for the talent deficit going elsewhere from the Boston Celtics. The Celtics need as much talent as they can get under valuable deals. Sam Hauser's contract just isn't completely egregious to me, and there is some level of value in it if he's producing at the rate he was, particularly during the 23-24 championship season for the Celtics. And so therefore, I could see Sam Hauser staying on the roster and the Celtics keeping Sam Hauser, just simply because we know Sam Hauser can be a rotation piece on a championship team, and he's only making $10 million. And the Celtics, if they're just salary dumping him elsewhere, the roster, in which has already gotten worse from last season, it could get even worse going into next season. And if you don't get anything back for Sam Hauser, what is the I always look at asset overturn, right?
Right.
What is the return of investment for that asset overturn? And if you're selling Sam Hauser for 2 second-round picks, right? Sam Hauser was an undrafted player. The Celtics signed him as an undrafted player, signed him to a two-way spot, brought him onto a standard deal, and then he produced for 3 seasons with the Celtics, or rather, I mean, 4 seasons now with the Celtics. And you're just going to give him away for nothing if you're the season. You're going to salary dump him. I mean, that would be terrible asset overturn from you actually attain some value and even a championship. Let's face it. I mean, a player who played in a championship rotation, you attained a lot of value from that undrafted signing, and now you're just going to move them for nothing.
Right.
I would put Hauser, Niang, and Simons. I would put them in the category of not untouchable, but I don't think they're as tradable as people think they're going to be. Same with Pritchard. Pritchard, we talked about a million times. His
Yeah, you
contract
can't
is
move
way too
Pritchard.
valuable. You can't do
Yeah.
it. But other players, if you're going to dump players, Tillman, I think, is still on that line. Even though he's a big man,
100%.
we talked about he plays a crucial spot. He's still on that. I mean, if the Celtics sign Charles Bassey, they have five bigs, including Amari Williams at the two-way spot. Tillman's still on that salary dump line to me. JD Davison and Jordan Walsh, those are two players as well that I don't. Well, first of all, the Celtics wouldn't need to salary dump them. Now they could salary dump them to another team within a transaction and pick up a pick, but Davison and Walsh, their guarantee dates. Walsh, his contract is only $200,000 of his contract is guaranteed, and the full guarantee doesn't come in until opening night. So the Celtics could just waive Jordan Walsh before opening night, and only $200,000 of his contract will remain on the books for the Celtics, which is, I mean, it's peanuts. It's not even
Right.
peanuts. It's peanut crumbs, right? Within the huge salary of the huge salary the salary sheet of the Celtics. But Walsh, he's basically a player the Celtics could waive and nearly dip under the second apron. They wouldn't be under the first apron. They wouldn't be under the luxury tax, but they would be under the second apron at the very least. JD Davison, his guarantee date isn't until January 10th, which the Celtics, they could waive him before the season as well. The bottom line with the Davison and Walsh, the Celtics could waive both of those players before the season even starts, and the Celtics can save themselves around $4.5 million, which is not nothing. $4.5 million is not nothing, especially when you're in the luxury tax. That would amount to over $10 million worth of luxury tax payments. So that's not nothing. And furthermore, the Celtics would open up 2 roster spots if they waived JD Davison and Jordan Walsh. I find it to be an extremely hard task for the Celtics to get under the luxury tax. Franco and I have gone back and forth on this, and we've said, at least Franco said the Celtics they have to get under. I mean, they have to get under the luxury tax is what the general narrative is, right? Where because the repeater tax is what's setting in for the Celtics. The Celtics don't get out of the luxury tax this year. The repeater tax will kick in. And the Celtics will essentially be paying a higher tax price in the future. But in terms of the repeater, the Celtics get out of the luxury tax this year and next year, which is a hard task when you're thinking about Jason Tatum coming out into the lineup and wanting to build a championship roster around Tatum. If the Celtics dip out of the luxury tax the next 2 seasons, that repeater tax goes away. So part of the narrative right now in Celtics Nation is, oh, well, the Celtics definitely want to dip under that luxury tax line. I don't really know how the Celtics are supposed to do that without completely shedding away more talent from this roster and getting
Right.
potentially nothing in return, which I see as
Right.
a problem. But here's the thing: Brad Stevens in his press conference specifically said the Celtics will be valuing the assets, the basketball assets, right, over the next couple of years, more so than just getting out of the luxury tax, which I do. I believe I brought this up somewhere on broadcast before that the Celtics could they just plan to pay the repeater tax? The repeater tax is not like the second apron. The second apron, it restricts you from doing all these different transactions within, trading different picks and players, and we all know that, right? But The repeater tax is just a higher tax bracket you're put into, essentially. Why couldn't the Celtics just plan ahead on that and say, well, we'll be in the higher tax bracket, and that's just our expectation. It's like instead of paying $1, every luxury tax dollar they go over, instead of paying $1.50, oh, we're paying $2.50 now. But why are we even thinking about paying that $1.50? If we want to build a championship, if you're looking at this from the Celtics perspective, they're looking at it like, oh, we're just building a championship squad and valuing basketball assets and valuing assets to maintain for when Tatum comes back. Maybe they're just planning on paying that $2.50 repeater tax and
Right.
and saying, well, that's just what it is. Because the roster right now, Tatum, Brown, White, Simons, Hauser, Niang, Pritchard, those are all solid rotation pieces. I mean, that's what,
Right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players right there. That's 7 solid rotation pieces. Now, obviously, the big glaring holes, you don't have a big man within those 7. But if you brought a big man along with those 7, that's 8 people within your rotation, and then you're on the fringes now. And you're considering. I mean, there's Shireman. I mean, is there Walsh, Gonzalez? Can any of those players step up? Is there another minimum guy? All of a sudden, if you add a big man into that, that's 8 players in your rotation, and maybe you have to add another big man. That's 9. And maybe there's a fringe player out there like a Shireman, like a Walsh, like a Hugo Gonzalez, or even another. We brought in Torrey Craig last year. We thought he was going to be that guy, but maybe there's another buyout candidate guy out there, or even a minimum free agent in the future. All of a sudden, you have your 9, 10, 11 players you need for a playoff run if you're the Celtics in 2027 with this roster they have right now. So that's where I'm not convinced that I'm get well. I'll disclaim this: the Celtics are going to make another move because they're over the second apron.
Right.
There's
That's
15 players on the roster. That the Celtics are going to make another move, but I'm not convinced it's going to be a Simons, Hauser, Niang move. And then you could throw out White, Brown, and Pritchard. That's not going to happen. But Simons, Hauser, Niang, I think the Celtics are going to hold on to those 3 players specifically. And then everybody else, Gonzalez, Shireman, they're going to stick around because they're, rookie, sophomore, right? You want to keep those players around because of what they could potentially still turn into. But the rest, right? Tillman, even Keita, it's like I would expect Keita and Garza. I would expect to be Keita, Garza, Minot. I mean, some of these players, they're just not proven to the point where if you had to salary dump them at the end of the day, if you had to salary dump Minot or Garza or Keita at the trade deadline, could you do it if you're the Celtics? Probably. Even Davison and Walsh as well. Tillman, Keita, Davison, Walsh, Garza, Minot. Throw in Miles Norris, Shulga, Amari Williams. If you had to salary dump any of those guys, now the two-way guys you wouldn't even need to salary dump. Their contracts don't count. But if you needed to salary dump any of those guys, the Celtics I think would be, maybe a little reluctant on some of them, but if you really had to, sure. The rest of the roster though, Tatum, Brown, White, Simons, Hauser, Niang, Pritchard, Gonzalez, and Shireman, I think they're going to stick around. I really think they're going to stick around, and that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 9 players right there. Can you add 2 big men into that? All of a sudden, you have an 11-man rotation that you feel pretty comfortable with competing in 2027. With that rotation, I think you feel pretty comfortable competing in 2027.
Yeah, there definitely is no Jason Tatum doesn't help this, right? Not having Tatum really makes this life difficult. But for me, there's no way Boston goes into this regular season under the second apron just because of what the Porzingis trade told me. That was too big of a salary dump trade to still be in the second apron, right? It's like you moved Porzingis to bring in Niang, right? Which contractually is beautiful for Celtics fans, but talent wise, you trade a near all-star caliber player for an 8th man, right? You're not going to stay under the second apron. I'm so shocked Hauser is still rostered. I'm with you. I believe there is a market for Hauser, and I believe you can actually retain draft assets for Hauser, which I would love to do right now. And I think if you could get rid of Hauser for like a first, I do believe there's a team that would give up a first round pick. Like maybe it's at the deadline, or maybe I believe you can get real draft compensation for Sam Hauser. I agree. He is a player that teams need. Teams need shooting. Teams value shooting, right? The Celtics were at this utmost luxury of having this plethora of 3-point shooters, right? That's not a normal thing in the league, right? We saw like the Rockets and some of these just super dry, even the Thunder at times. Oklahoma could use some sharp shooting off their bench. Like some of these offenses are dry and not as 3-point heavy as Boston is, obviously. And then Simons. I'm so with you. Keep Simons around. This is a dude who you might have lucked into. Like, here's my thing with Simons, right? He's 26. He is, in my opinion, one of the most polished offensive scorers in the league in terms of the guard position. What he can do with the ball is very, very remarkable. You bring Simons in, you're in clear need of another scoring punch with Tatum out. This is a guy that could, I wouldn't be shocked if he gave you 23 a night, right? And you're rolling around, you give him that extension, and here you are, you talk about assets. Simons is a guy where it's like, okay, this is great. He's a bridge year player. Maybe we see him in 26, 27, right? And then, you've built him up. Yeah, this is a guy, he's a 26-year-old. He's averaging 24. He's averaging 25. He's 23 in that range. It's like, now you got a guy, a big name player to hit the market. That's your piece. And that's what's so appealing to me about Simons is that say if a Giannis were to come up, or say if, God forbid a Luka, even though I'd stay away from Luka, comes up, or you never know what player could hit the market in today's league, right? Now you've built yourself this young scoring offensive of demon, I want to say, that you could send out. And again, worst case is here you are with your starting point guard that gets you 20 a night. It's like moving Simons now, I think, would be jumping the gun. I'm on board with finding a trade partner for Hauser or Niang. More so Hauser, because I believe Shireman, you can slot into the Hauser role and he can not be as an efficient 3-point shooter, but can produce offensively, I think, at a similar value, and he's cheaper. But in totality, in terms of how you just broke down what Boston looks like going next year, if Boston wasn't in the second apron, they would have positioned themselves phenomenally. When Tatum comes back, I'm with you. Honestly, a solid 8-man core with Tatum slotted in. You get yourself a big man and boom, you're right back in contention, right? Bearing the Tatum, how that looks, but I'm with you. But I do think there's more moves on the horizon, or move singular kind of. I think that's where we're both at. Move. I wouldn't call it moves. Maybe like, again, maybe you cut Walsh and then you make a trade. That's moves. But in terms of trade transactions,
it's definitely not going to be moves where people go, "Oh, I gotta go log into every social media account and see what the reaction is on this." I mean, it'll be a move where somebody looks at it like they're gonna be at the pool and they'll be like, "Okay, Jordan Walsh is gone, cool." Like that's all it's gonna be. I hate to say it, folks, but that's where we're at in the offseason. But I will say we've looked a little idiotic on this in the past because, I mean, Kyrie, he was moved in August. Karl Anthony Towns, he was
it's
moved in
true.
September.
Like,
I
it
mean,
happens.
Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder was in that. They were both in that Kyrie deal. So the moves, I'm Drew Holiday too. Drew Holiday was either
3
early
days before camp,
September,
right?
end of August. I don't even. I
Yeah.
mean, but those are some moves that we didn't necessarily see coming in the past, and yet all of a sudden they happen late in the offseason. And it could happen with the Celtics. And I think what's interesting about right now, when you look at the entire landscape of the NBA, there's still a lot of quality free agents out there deep into free agency. I honestly cannot remember a year in the past where we've had this many quality free agents on the market by July 22nd. And
Right.
I said it I said it last season. I gave out the theory of the CBA, is it going to dry up the market? And I'm actually, I always blame it on the CBA, and everybody blames it on the CBA. I don't think it's the CBA entirely. I think it's the spending habits of NBA franchises. Sometimes
Right.
I think it's the spending habits. Just did some of the past spending habits, the regularities that teams set for themselves in terms of, oh, well, this player is a young player, so we're just going to pay him $40 million per year. You think about, Michael Porter Jr., one of those players. Oh, he's a young player, but he's not a star, still gets 40 million, right? Brandon Ingram last year on his extension. The team's spending habits in the past, just giving out money to players who didn't necessarily earn it, right? are those spending habits going to dry out the market for future players? And I wonder if that's happening right now in free agency, where a bunch of these quality free agents are looking at their options right now going, wait, this guy over here makes 15 and this guy makes 14 and this guy makes upwards of 20. But right now I'm getting taxpayer mid-level exception offers. I'm getting $5 million deals, $7 million deals. I'm getting a minimum. Like, I think that's what could potentially be happening with some of these free agents right now, where they look at their counterparts and go, wait, I'm way better than that player. And he's making 15 million a year. And yet they're only receiving around $5 to $7 million, because that's all teams have to give out. That's all
Right.
teams have to give out. So that is a little interesting right now, but it could also signal that, for some teams, more moves could be on the way, given, you think about Jonathan Kuminga with the Warriors, Josh Giddey with the Bulls. Some of these teams, do
Horford with
they?
the C's. I mean, he's still out there. Like, Al hasn't signed yet.
Right, and there could be more moves on the horizon to shift some rosters around to bring in free agents, or kind of, uh we all know in the past moves have been made, whether a free agent signing or a team trading somebody via another signing, right? Say, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, right? In 2019. I was going to use Kevin Durant in 2016, but the 2019 version is actually a way better example. The Knicks and the Nets, they were both going after KD and Kyrie. Obviously, we know the Nets landed KD and Kyrie, and the Knicks, they traded Kristaps Porzingis earlier in 2019 in February, in order to create the cap space for KD and Kyrie. And once they didn't sign KD and Kyrie, what did they do? They went and signed guys like Julius Randle and Nerlens Noel and Derrick Rose. And I don't know if Derrick Rose was in that class or not, but all of these random free agents, right, in 2019. Taj Gibson, was he another one? I don't
Taj
remember
Gibson
ever. It was a
was yeah.
bunch of random free agents the Knicks brought in, and they were clowned to oblivion because they were trying to get KD and Kyrie. And then, the memes were, you traded Kristaps to sign Julius Randle, who we understand, Julius Randle became something with the Knicks and the Timberwolves later on in time. He was even a 20 point per game scorer then, but he wasn't seen in the same light as Kristaps at that point in time, and KD and Kyrie, obviously. But the Knicks, they immediately pivoted upon seeing the Nets sign KD and Kyrie. Could that happen now, where teams are vying to maybe sign a Kuminga, or maybe vying to sign a Giddey, and once they end up with the Bulls or the Warriors, or once they end up with another team, maybe that's when the domino falls and teams start making other moves, signing other free agents. That's a possibility right now. And I honestly cannot remember a year where free agency and it seems like there are more moves within the NBA sphere. There are a lot more moves within the NBA sphere on the horizon, yet we're almost in August. I mean, we're
Right.
about a week away from August right now, and it's not, typically the news cycle slows down in August, but I think we're going to see a little bit more of an increased news cycle this year, and the Celtics could potentially be one of those teams that, they don't make noise, but they're part of the cycle of teams potentially making more moves this offseason.
Right. Maybe seeing some, side effects of teams trying to catch up to the new CBA. So, you'll have to wait and see. Seamus, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, guys. Coming up next, we have a little power rankings of the free agency, a little fun winners and losers power ranking. We're going to check in weekly, guys. That's coming up next. Again, Seamus, thank you so much, guys. If you haven't watched Seamus Zarlingo for some reason on Celtics Talk Weekly, one, I'm sure you just haven't seen us before, but two, go check him out. He goes live on Celtics Talk Weekly Live. He has his own show over there. Go check him out. Everything will be on the YouTube channel. I can link it, but again, it's right back on the Celtics Talk Weekly. So go check out Seamus there. Seamus, thank you so much for coming on, guys. Coming up next, a little power ranking of the free agency tracker. This brings us to my three winners and losers of the 2025 NBA offseason so far. Now, the date I'm recording this is July 22nd, 2025. 2:30 p.m. to be exact, in case anybody wanted to know. But this is after the Damian Lillard news, the Chris Paul news, the Bradley Beal news. I mean, we've had some real moves and some real shakeups here this offseason. With that, I'm going to be diving in explaining my three winners and three losers, starting off with the losers. Now, I guess to me, what defines a loser is a team that's taken a significant step back. And a winner, obviously, is a team that I think has set themselves up for success in not only next season, but for the potential in seasons moving forward. So with that, let's hop in, guys, to the winners and losers, starting off with losers. Now, my first one comes at no surprise. Honestly, all three of these are going to come at no surprise. However, we're starting off with number one with the reigning Eastern Conference champions, Indiana Pacers. Now, there's two sides of this. Indiana is this team that, looked so promising 2 years. And then in a game 7, in a snap of a finger, everything went downhill. Tyrese Halliburton torn Achilles. We're going to miss the entirety of the 2025-2026 NBA season. And on top of that, you have Miles Turner signing that deal, that $26 million a year contract with the Milwaukee Bucks, drawing him away from Indiana. And Turner was an integral part of kind of Indiana's success in these past 2 playoff runs. And I'm not sure if they have set themselves up for success moving forward in that big man slot. They have not acquired anything that's significant to replace a Miles Turner, who, in my opinion, is a prototypical, a prototypical guy, big man, really in the league. He can stretch the floor. He's great at blocking shots. He's a switchable asset on the perimeter. He's a very versatile, athletic big man that I think will do well in Milwaukee. I don't love that much money for Miles Turner. I don't hate it, but I'm not obsessed with the fit down in Milwaukee, although I do like the pairing alongside Giannis. I just don't know how sustainable that is. However, for the Indiana side of things, obviously you got Tyrese Halliburton, who ruptures his Achilles, and you got the loss of Miles Turner. That's going to make you a loser. A couple questions I got with Indiana, right? What does the Indiana's future look like with the Tyrese Halliburton question, right? And then where's the big man replacement? You lost Sabonis, you move Sabonis for Halliburton, that works. You hang with your guy Miles Turner, and unfortunately you lose him to Milwaukee. So what is that big man situation going to look like? And most importantly, what's next year going to look like? Is this a retooling year, right? Are you going to try to compete? You got Nembhard, you got Nesmith, you got Mathurin, you got Siakam. You still have these assets, right? It's just those 2 main pieces are now out of the equation, right? The East is weak. Can Indiana be a frisky 6 seed, 7 seed still, maybe 5? I see a world where they can. The path there is really difficult, and that puts them into the first bracket of losers in my eyes. Up next, the Boston Celtics. Fortunately, I got to put the Boston Celtics on the losers list. Pretty self-explanatory. The loss of Jrue Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Jason Tatum with the ruptured Achilles, Al Horford likely not coming back, and Luke Cornett. That is 5 key rotation guys that the Boston Celtics are going to be without for the 2025-2026 NBA season. I don't hate the additions Boston brought in. Anthony Simons, I think, is a big-time upgrade offensively from Jrue Holiday. They're going to be taking a step back defensively. However, I like that addition. I think Georges Niang is Georges Niang, right? I really don't love it, but I do believe he's a movable asset to pair alongside, stack contract type of guy. He's making $8 million. I do believe he holds some market value in this league. He's a floor spacing shooter, and I do believe he can be moved if Boston needs to. And then Josh Minott and Luka Garza. Boston had some addition. There was a lot of subtraction, but they did have some addition. For me, really, what's the overlooming, losers list is they're going to be without Jason Tatum. They're going to be without a top 5 player in the NBA. That's obviously going to dox them and kind of insert them into the losers list. Now, again, what next season could look like for Boston, we're going to be talking about that all year long. So in terms of questions, the biggest one is, can Jaylen Brown be that guy, right? What does a first option Jaylen Brown look like? I think it's exciting. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and I got some faith with him, but there are some questions with him. He needs to clean up his ball handling, his decision-making. Can he be the focal point on offense and run the offense? We haven't seen it before. And it's going to be answered pretty quickly this season. We're going to see if Jaylen Brown can be that guy and be that all NBA first team caliber player we know his running mate is, and he can potentially be. With that, guys, excuse me. With that comes our third and final loser of the 2025-26 or 2025, offseason. That is the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors have not added or subtracted a single piece the Golden State Warriors, they have subtracted. They have not added a single piece to their roster. Obviously, losing Kevon Looney to the New Orleans Pelicans they are in a rough spot. I mean, Golden State is a team that was seriously flawed, and you could see the looming issue of a big man help. Quentin Post, Kevon Looney, two kind of polar opposite types of guys. Quentin Post is more of a stretch five, offensive minded guy. Kevon Looney is really more of a rim running, rim presence, big man. Curry goes down. We obviously know how that happens and how that plays out with Golden State. But my problem with Golden State, that puts them into the losers category, is you're an old team that has young assets that could you be used to find a direction, right? You make the move for Jimmy Butler, you move Andrew Wiggins, you move these pieces to acquire Jimmy Butler, which I liked that, right? Which is clear to me that you're going all in on these next 2 to 3 years of Steph Curry. It does not matter what it looks like after those 2 to 3 years, because you have made clear moves and clear intentions to compete right now with Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler. Curry being both over the ages of 35, your window really is the next 2 years, maybe 3 years max. And here is Golden State, and they aren't making any of those. They aren't making any moves to begin with, but they're not making any moves, which scares me from an NBA fan perspective, right? The Boston Celtics fan of me loves it, but they got to make a move. They got to do something. They got to pick a direction. You got, Kuminga and Moses Moody who are just dying on your bench, and you're sitting here and you're thinking to yourself, like, where's it at? What's the turning point? What's the breaking point? They had a successful second half of the year last year. They were actually very, very efficient with Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry both in the lineup. They make the second round of the Western Conference playoffs, before falling in 5 games to the Minnesota Timberwolves after a Steph Curry injury. But this is a situation where post 2022, the Warriors have kind of been this mediocre, beating up on lesser competition playoff team, where in 2023, Sacramento, Steph Curry has a legacy game in Game 7, right, which is no discredit to them, but if that Kings team has some experience, there probably isn't a Game 7, and Golden State is probably eliminated in 5 or 6. And then, in 2025, this year, the same thing with Houston. Golden State up 3-1. They allow Houston back into the series before sealing the deal with experience in Game 7. So I do believe from a rotation standpoint, Golden State needs a big man. Now, the Al Horford rumors have been going on now for about 20 days, and there has been no movement on that front. It sounds like a deal is not going to get struck anytime soon, and Al Horford is considering retirement. But if I'm Golden State, you're a small ball team that is old, and you have not made any additions. In losing Kevon Looney, who in my opinion was your best asset and piece, not just for trading, but also for actual performance in the rotation, you lose him for free to New Orleans, and that kind of puts Golden State as the third loser. So the 3 losers, Indiana, Boston, and Golden State rounding out so far. Again, things can change. Power rankings happen. Let's check in on my 3 winners so far. In this one, it's funny because there's a trend, Eastern and Western Conference, and it's interesting that is the trend so far. But, rounding it off, the first winner, and this one's pretty obvious. It's the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks, obviously, drafting Cooper Flagg is key. They signed D'Angelo Russell. They brought back their guys. This is a team, obviously, no Kyrie Irving potentially for the entirety of next season. We don't know what that's going to look like. But with a team of Cooper Flagg, Anthony Davis, D'Angelo Russell, Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington. I mean, this is a team, Klay Thompson. This is a team in a Western Conference that's very crowded that can compete. I believe this is a team that can find themselves really within the mix. I do believe there's a log jam at that big man spot, in that forward spot, and I do think that needs to be figured out, because right now, what does your starting lineup look like exactly, right? D'Angelo Russell, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, Cooper Flagg, and Anthony Davis. You got 3 guys there on the back end of that starting 5 at the forward and center spot, with Washington, Flagg, and Davis kind of give you a lot of the same thing. And we've seen that before kind of out in Cleveland with Garland and Mitchell and Allen and Mobley. When it comes down to the thick of it in the playoffs and teams start scheming, you can kind of start finding the weakness, and redundancy is a big problem in today's NBA. And I believe that starting lineup might be a little redundant. So we'll have to see what that looks like. But again, anytime you land probably the best prospect we've seen in the past, since Zion, maybe Anthony Davis and dating back to LeBron. I mean, Cooper Flagg is in that echelon of rookies coming into the NBA. Youngest player, first overall pick drafted since LeBron James. I mean, this guy could be the real deal. And, he ends up in Dallas. So again, for Dallas, you went from the biggest losers just 4 months ago after trading Luka Doncic for a bag of potato chips in a sandwich to LA. And all of a sudden you find yourself, as in my book, the biggest winners of this offseason so far. Moving on to number 2, another Western Conference team, the Denver Nuggets. In my eyes, the Denver Nuggets may have had the most successful offseason in the NBA. And I really believe that they have set themselves up to really compete in the Western Conference next season. They brought in Bruce Brown. They bring in Bruce Brown back. They brought in Tim Hardaway Jr. The trade that I love the most is the Michael Porter Jr. for Cameron Johnson swap that they pulled off. I believe that trade is going to really benefit them in the long run. I believe Cam Johnson is a perfect fit around Nikola Jokic. He's a player that can generate offense when needed as a third option, right? If you got Jokic or Murray out for a game, Cameron Johnson is more than capable of stepping in and producing and giving you 20 to 25 points on any given night. He is that good. He's a phenomenal spacer and shooter. He can get stops on the defensive end. You bring back Gordon, right? You still got Gordon. You bring back Bruce Brown for the bench, and now all of a sudden your bench kind of has something, right? Last year your bench was Russell Westbrook and DeAndre Jordan and Zeke Naji and Julian Strother, and it kind of felt a little just. You didn't really have a real backup production-wise point guard, and your big man depth was DeAndre Jordan, and there just wasn't any depth behind Jokic. What do? They bring in Jonas Valanciunas. So with the additions of Valanciunas, Cameron Johnson, Bruce Brown, I mean, this was a huge offseason for the Denver Nuggets. I believe that they are going to position themselves to be right back in the NBA Finals and be that first team that could potentially see themselves in 2 NBA Finals in the past 7 years. I believe they've positioned themselves really, really well to do that. Now, my next one is an interesting one, because I'm a log jam between 2. And I'll tell you those 2. It's either the Houston Rockets or the Los Angeles Clippers. And, at the time that I'm recording this, obviously Chris Paul and Bradley Beal going to LA. And something I've kind of concluded with both of these teams is that they're both huge question marks, right? They are both huge questions that need to be answered with these 2 teams, because on one hand, you got the Los Angeles Clippers, who have all this talent, right? You have James Harden, you have Kawhi Leonard, you have Zubac, you bring in Beal, you bring in all these assets, right, to, really produce for you. And you bring in Bogdanovich. I mean, I'm looking at the roster now. I mean, this is a roster. You bring in Brook Lopez. You got Derrick Jones Jr. still. You got Patty Mills. You got again, this is a roster. You bring in John Collins. I mean, this is a team that added a lot. They added Bogdanovich. They added John Collins. They added Brook Lopez. They added Chris Paul. They added Patty Mills, I believe, as well. I mean, this is a team that really added to their arsenal on already, in my opinion, Bradley Beal, I forgot him, on an already pretty deep team. And here they are now adding more. So there are some questions, though, with this team, without a doubt. And those questions are really dependent on what are the Clippers going to look like come April, because the Clippers have had an incredibly successful offseason. They have added talent on talent on talent, and it's just been ridiculous to see what they have added in terms of a talent aspect. But on the other hand, it's the Clippers, and it feels like we say this every year, and we bring up the whole, well, if Kawhi can stay healthy, well, if Harden can put together a playoff run. So that's a different conversation for a different day. In terms of additions, I'm giving the Clippers this 3rd winner spot over the Houston Rockets, who acquired Kevin Durant and Dorian Finney-Smith, which are 2 great additions. But I'm going to give the edge to LA. I don't love the Bradley Beal addition, but again, you're essentially having the the Phoenix Suns pay Bradley Beal for you, why not give it a go? A little David Justice in 2001 with the Oakland A's, or 2002 with the Oakland A's vibes. Like, why not go for it? So I'm kind of there for it. That is my 3 winners and my 3 losers of the NBA offseason so far. Again, maybe more moves coming. I'm sure I'm recording this now and some blockbuster deal is going to strike because that's my luck. Guys, I just want to say thank you so much for listening in and joining us on this week's installment of the Celtics Talk Weekly Podcast. A little bit of a different format here. I'm going for a little bit more cleaner look. I know I said I was back a little bit ago, but we had a little bump in the road, but we are back now and we are rolling smoothly weekly with a more and cleaner production. I hope you guys enjoyed this first episode. And again, guys, if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, do that. You can catch me and many more of the guys here at Celtics Talk Weekly producing content on a daily. And if you're not already following us on all of our social medias, everything is going to be in the description down below. And my question for you guys is, what do you think of this new format? Are you a fan of it? Do you want me to go back to the old one? It's a little bit more cleaner in my opinion, but again, I'm looking to see what you guys think of this new format, guys. So again, thank you so much for watching or listening in on this week's episode, and I will see you guys next Wednesday for another episode of Celtics Talk Weekly Podcast.